Welcome to Transaction Preparedness, getting your company ready for any type of deal in any economy. The session is presented by Ulmer & Byrne and Barnes Wendling. So let's meet our panelists. First, Floyd Troughton, Director of Barnes & Wendling CPAs. Next, meet Bill Koblitz, Founder, Owner, and CEO of Mobility Works. Meet Jim Pashak, Founder and CEO of Bravo Wellness. Gary Schuster, President and CEO of Omco. And your moderator today is David Black, a partner and vice chair of the business department of Ulmer & Byrne LLP. David, take it away.
Welcome everyone out there. Welcome to Transaction Preparedness. We've put together, I think, a fabulous panel. So on behalf of my co-sponsor, Floyd Troughton, I'm David Black, and I'm looking forward to presenting those of you that are business owners or stakeholders that are looking at transactions in the next year or two, some really good resources to help direct you in a way that will bring a good outcome. Just a little bit of background about me. I spent a bunch of years in the Marine Corps before I went into law. And one of the things they taught us was the 7P principle. And I'm going to talk about 6 of those. Keep it clean. It's proper prior planning prevents poor performance. And so we're going to talk about the prior planning you can do to help maximize the value of your business in a transaction. So rather than talk about me, I think we're just going to pitch it right over to Jim, and Jim's going to talk about his transaction or transition from an employee to entrepreneur and the transactions that followed from that. So Jim, why don't you take it away?
Great. Thanks, David. It's a pleasure to be here today. I never anticipated being considered a deal maker when I started my company 12 years ago, but I've learned a lot over 12 years, and hopefully there's a nugget or two that will be helpful to somebody out there. Again, I'm Jim Pashak. I founded a company called Bravo Wellness in 2008. I was not out there looking for a business to buy or start or anything like that. Quite frankly, I just couldn't find a job in 2008, and I knew I had a great idea. Had some good fortune to meet some great people like Floyd Troughton, who helped me put together a business plan and a pro forma and see what we could make happen. Unfortunately, the timing was right to not only start a successful business, but to become the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year in 2011 and hit a great stride during a very difficult economic time for our country. I did raise capital. Initially, I started with just some friends and family and tried to secure some working capital, but I couldn't get a bank loan. I couldn't get any credit. And so one of the things we had done was tell customers, if you pay a deposit up front, I will give you a sizable discount on the balance you owe. And that's actually how we funded the startup of Bravo, and found myself never having a nickel of debt, and using that model to get very far down the road, to the point in 2014, I went to the JP Morgan Chase conference out in San Francisco. And frankly, I was blown away. I had no idea that this alternative universe existed of people out there who were doing matchmaking for companies and investors. I did have a investment banker at the time, and they arranged 21 meetings in a day and a half. It was grueling, but all 21 wanted to take me to the prom. And now I found myself from, not really being sure if we needed money or what we would do with it, to having everyone telling me I was beautiful and they wanted to help the company grow. Going through that process, raising private equity, I was fortunate to have some advisors that weren't just yes men and women that were telling me what I wanted to hear, but asking important questions like, Jim, what do you really want out of this? For so long, all I could think about was don't screw it up. Don't lose your house, don't embarrass the family name. But once you actually have some momentum and you have options, I realized I really hadn't thought about what a successful exit looked like, and did I ever even want to exit? So through that initial phase, bringing in some minority capital, really helped us to get our house in order, understand what a financial audit and a security audit and the due diligence process would look like. Fortunately, we didn't have a lot of cleanup to do because, again, we had from day one always kept things very neat and tidy, and were able to get through that diligence process pretty swiftly. But fast forward 6 years, 2020, and actually 2019, I was approached by Medical Mutual to ask if I would be interested in selling the company. The mantra I've tried to live by is success occurs when preparedness and opportunity meet. I believe that was Zig Ziglar, but I wasn't looking, but I was prepared. And because of the steps I had taken early in the process to know what it is I was looking for me, it wasn't like flipping a house. It wasn't, the highest bidder is going to win. It was, if I hear of an opportunity that helps Bravo maximize its potential, I'm interested. What's going to happen to my employees? What's going to happen to our customers? What's going to happen to the legacy potential of the organization? And certainly what's going to happen to my investors, and what does this do for my own personal family? But going through that private equity minority investment process was very different than going through selling the entire company to a strategic buyer. Yet neither of those would have happened had we not always run a disciplined company and had professional leaders, and frankly, upgraded talent and technology and systems and processes all along the way to be ready for that next level. So it's been an exciting journey, and we were able to sell the company to Medical Mutual in January. They've been fantastic partners, and I'm very excited about what that means for the future of Bravo.
Thanks, Jim. Bill, kind of a different perspective. You and I have worked together for about a dozen years, done 20-some acquisitions, and then a recent major investments. What's your perspective more from the buyer side who has looked a lot of these deals?
Yeah, well, I think certainly making sure that your house is in order, like Jim was referring to, of having good financial statements, audited statements, knowing you're working with someone, an investment banker to talk with, will be key. But I think the main thing that produces more value, we all hear about multiples of EBITDA as a way a company can get valued. And if you get underneath that, why does one company get a higher multiple and another company gets a lower? Certainly depends on larger companies tend to get higher multiples than smaller ones. But the real thing about a multiple is the ability to grow your company. So putting your focus on how do I grow this company in the next 3 or 4 years and know that I have an opportunity to double or triple the size of it, and putting a focus on where is my growth coming from. Is it coming from geographic expansion? Is it coming from adding other products? Is it coming from a new channel of distribution, maybe online selling? But kind of getting out of your company and looking at it from the outside to look for the opportunities for growth, I think is key, because when you approach someone to become an investor or a buyer of your business, they want to buy it knowing that they can grow it and increase the value. So you need that runway set up. So for me, certainly talking with other people has been the key. David Black was key in giving a lot of advice, both about growth as well about the acquisitions we did. And as importantly, he introduced me to other people to talk with, to talk about the business, to talk about how does our business look to you? How do you think we might grow it? Get other perspectives that are outside your industry, outside your company. I'm active in YPO. If you're in an organization like that, or EO, or Vistage, or some group that gives you more exposure to more people. And I'd highly recommend you get that team together of advisors, whether it's a formal board or an advisory board, or it's just individuals that you're constantly talking with to get new ideas. It's really those other people's ideas that were very much the key to our success, and to look at where the greatest opportunities for our company might be. So I put a lot of emphasis on getting that team together that gives you good direction, good advice, to put your growth plan together, and then teaming up with a very good investment banker as you go to talk with other companies.
Fabulous. Any anecdotal things about what things you've seen that have given you pause in the buy process that folks might want to be thinking about looking out for?
Well, certainly, you don't want to have surprises, so you want to believe that their financial statements are believable, and there's not going to be a surprise there. Looking at the team of people that are working in the company is key. Certainly key for us, and I think it's key for anyone that's buying, is that the culture of the company is strong. The team members are motivated. They understand the mission of the company. So you figured out what the mission was and how you're going to grow it, and then they also are relating to that mission. Having a strong purpose to your company is key. Why are we here? What are we doing? All that's critical. So you're looking for all those kind of signals.
Great. Wonderful. Gary, I want to turn to you. You've talked, as we've talked in the past, about looking internally and looking some of the soft side things. Would you talk with our panel and our viewers about that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, David. Most business owners have successfully operated their business for many, many years. When the owner looks at his business, he looks at it through his eyes, and typically they have a great view of their business. But when an outside party or sophisticated buyer looks at that business, they may view it differently. And so there's a lot of factors that go into that, and oftentimes the owner of the business doesn't realize those factors because they're part of the business, if you will. And many of these factors could compromise the value of the company. So I just have a list of some items that when we look at businesses, it's a bit of a checklist, and it's pretty basic and softer side of things, as you said. But it's kind of like when you sell your house, you want to make sure that you have a neat and clean properties and facilities inside and out, parking lot, fence lines, and things like that. Inside the factory, so my view is more operations side of businesses, but it applies to a lot of other businesses, including distribution and so forth. But inside your business, you want to make sure everything is neat and clean. You could have a 40-year-old piece of equipment in your operation that looks like 100 years old, or you could have that same 40-year-old piece of equipment that looks 5 years old. And it's all how you present it, maintain it, and so forth. And you want to make sure that your inventories are organized inside your facility, finished goods, WIP, raw materials. You want to have good inventory records, and just to help with the neat and clean organization, you want to make sure you purge your obsolete inventories. I think everyone tends to hold their obsolete inventories too long. And if you do go into transaction, the value of those inventories are going to go away anyways. You want to make sure that you're in compliance with OSHA, which is very basic for the health and safety of your employees. But the regs are not always clear, and there's a lot of ambiguity. So it would always be good to have a fresh set of eyes look at that. In fact, I believe OSHA has a program where they'll actually come in, audit your facility with no jeopardy and at no cost as well. If you're in a manufacturing business, you would ideally like to embrace some level of lean manufacturing, even if it's only 5S and continuous improvement. And if you're not doing that, there's probably someone in your organization who would have interest in leading that charge, if you will. And many of the community colleges and universities have outreach programs for training for that. And then consistent with that also, you want to have some level of shop floor data boards, employee engagement notifications and things like that to show that when someone's on tour that the employees are engaged with management of the company. Ideally, you want some level of a quality program. ISO 9001 is the most internationally recognized. It's not an easy thing to do, but you could have a quality program that conforms to key elements of that without going through an expensive and long process to do that. You want to be able to talk about customer service. So key metrics there that you want to be able to talk about is on-time delivery, any customer complaints, how you manage customer complaints, and continuous improvement coming out of that. You want to have organizational charts and hopefully a succession plan that works behind that. And there's been discussion about multiples on businesses, and the ability to demonstrate growth in the future is a big factor regarding that. And if you go through a process, your investment banker is going to help you establish that in the SIM. But it is important to have that as a living, breathing part of your business, that you do have charts, target customers, next actions, how are you legitimately, trying to grow your business? And then lastly, everybody probably has some type of information system, MRP system, and oftentimes it's not fully implemented. Modules are not completely being used. And so it would be good to take a step back and look at that and see if there's anything else that you could more professionalize your business. So that's kind of like the list from maybe easiest to hardest, but it's all basic stuff. And even if you don't land up in a transaction, all these things have economical benefit when you hold and continue to operate the business.
Gary, that's really helpful. I appreciate it. Floyd, you and I are in a little bit of a unique position because we touch a lot of transactions, and we get to see, hopefully most of those are successful, some of those not so successful. So what's your perspective? I know you like to begin with the end in mind and ask people, what do they want? But run with that and tell us what's your thoughts and how you advise folks that are thinking about a transaction in their future.
Thank you, David. Knowing what the business owner really wants is critical for them deciding where they're going with the process. Many times business owners have a perception of value, and they know it's usually based off EBITDA. EBITDA today has to be tempered with the fact of EBITDAC, adding the COVID factor to it right now, which has knocked down valuations, has knocked down the earnings of companies from that standpoint. So it's worthwhile many times to go out and get a third-party appraisal, take a look at the value of the company, to take a look on a comparison basis for similar companies and as close as possible industries. How do we stack up in value from a size, from a profitability, from a network standpoint, to see what makes sense then? That comparison really is quite helpful for the owners. Many good owners are out there, but when they are forced to take a critical look at their own house, they discover a lot of things in the process, and that's what tends to come up. So as Gary mentioned, operationally, they have a lot of things in place that works very well from that point. So there's a concept out there called a quality of earnings, Q of E, which the seller can go out and pay for a third-party firm, usually an accounting firm or an IT firm or a law firm, to assist them, put them on the best footing possible about where their business really stands, not only from a pure financial standpoint, but from, what have they filed all their proper tax returns? Are they registered in all the states from the legal standpoint? Have they done all the right things? Do they have lawsuits pending from that standpoint? So you try to make that work. All three C-suite folks mentioned about audits. If you have an audit, that probably gets you anywhere between 4 and 5% more purchase price, because the buyer has a greater comfort that the firm has been operated on a very high level, and they've done all the accounting, they've looked at all the things, and they report out to bankers, suppliers, and others where they really stand from that point. So I think that's very important. But I think one of the things right now is just getting them to understand that it is a process. It takes a lot of time to go through this. This will be the hardest job they will do till their company gets sold. They will take their eyes off the ball because they have so much to do with this. But from your world, David, I think there's a lot of things that you look at too, from like the reps and warranty side. What would you say that's the greatest concern from there, and other factors that you are concerned from a legal standpoint?
Thanks, Floyd. From a legal standpoint, I think it really starts with the due diligence checklist. I traditionally, as I'm representing a buyer, I'm going to send out to the seller a 4 or 5 page list, depending on the nature of the business, that's going to drill down on things that will eventually affect the reps and warranties. And it's going to ask questions about your intellectual property. Do you really own what you're selling? And it may not be that somebody else owns it. It may be that nobody owns it. It may be that the transaction is going to go forward and it turns out the lease isn't transferable, or your employees aren't subject to any kind of non-competes and all the goodwill can be dissipated, or there's intellectual property that actually somebody else owns or you develop but never properly secured. So there are a lot of issues like that. And I think one of the initial gut checks that somebody's looking to buy can do is to ask a M&A attorney for a good due diligence checklist and go through it. But it all comes down to, and what I've heard throughout, I want to go back through the panel, what I've heard everybody talk about is having a fresh set of eyes on the business. Clearly, the buyer and the buyer's counsel and professionals are a very fresh set of eyes that are looking. That's probably not the first set of fresh eyes you want looking at your business. And so I want to go back and talk about how do each of you find those fresh set of eyes that helped you out. And I think one thing in our preparation discussions that came up that I think Jim raised, which is very basic, is there is a whole language that we have all used on this meeting right now, because this is what we do, that many that are viewing this may be sitting here saying, wow, this is completely over my head. I don't even understand the language. So Jim, you went, like you said, from employee to C-suite to 100% sale. How did you ramp yourself up to speed? How did you learn the language? How did you find people that would come in and give you an honest evaluation, but without any predatory thought or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I actually remember the first time I got a call from an investment banker, and I tried to explain that I didn't have any money to invest just yet. You know, I was building a business, and it took a long time to click that they were actually more like realtors that wanted to help me sell my company. I'm like, well, why don't you call yourself an investment banker? Anyway, totally went through that experience. I got to know Investopedia really well. So you've heard of Wikipedia. There's Investopedia that you could literally Google words in Investopedia while people are talking to you and nod your head like you know what they're talking about. But quite honestly, I would usually ask, stop and ask people to give you an example of what they mean. And I think it's critical to just, this is too big of a decision. We're affecting lives, paychecks, people's mortgages, customer promises. And if you don't understand, ask questions. Do your homework. There's resources out there. There's lots of great YouTube videos and events like this that you can learn a lot. I would also just echo Bill's statement on joining a group. I joined EO about 6 years ago and have met once a month faithfully with 7 other CEOs, entrepreneurs, and initially thought, what could I glean from somebody who has a box factory or owns warehouses? They're in such a different business, and I was immediately impressed with how many common problems we were trying to solve, and how iron sharpens iron. I absolutely feel like having a place where you can let your guard down, ask the hard questions, hold each other accountable, really goes a long way.
And Bill, you've used advisory boards in the past. How were you able to populate those, and what benefit did you find from that?
Yeah, I've gotten good recommendations for in my circumstance from YPO, people that were in my forum with YPO, just like Jim did with EO. One of them recommended Floyd Troughton to speak with. Floyd introduced me to some other people. David, you introduced me to a number of people. I think to get really solid people involved, you just talk to quite a few different people, see who you connect with and who connects with you and your industry. One meeting will lead to another meeting. and it's over time, meeting with more people, that you get those trusted advisors together, and then start a cadence of meeting with them on a regular basis, because this all does take time and energy, and we all know our businesses also take a ton of time and energy just to keep them running. So it's almost like you have two jobs, and you got to recognize that you do have two very different jobs, and the job of determining if you're going to sell your company and or get equity investors is very intense, and you got to give it a lot of time and energy, and talk with people that are familiar with that process. So you're going to be meeting with your lawyers, investment bankers, talk with a lot of different people in that area, accountants, consultants, and then other business owners who have been through it before, to get ideas of who else to talk with.
Sure. And Gary, how about you? Who's challenged you, and how did you find those people?
Yeah, so I think it's all the same discussion. Advisory boards are excellent to have, and you can reach out to your peer competitors or people like that are not directly competing with you, and join some groups and things like that. And I think you could also probably leverage your service providers more than you think, as far as getting input from them. Have them do tours of your facility, and have them provide another set of eyes on how someone else may look at your operations and so forth. And then even like service providers, so your accounting firm will be generating reports on inventories, but instead of just looking at a report, let's walk the inventory and help provide what is the quality of that inventory and how a buyer may look at it, and just look at things from different angles like that, and you leverage your service providers.
Sure. Appreciate that. And Floyd, any wrapping thoughts from you?
Yeah, I think it's very important to cast your net as broadly as you can, to learn, as everyone mentioned, from as many folks as possible, to make sure you have excellent legal counsel to help you through the process. Sometimes you start a process in the deal, and sometimes you don't get it done, and sometimes that's the best choice. But in today's environment, I think we got to be all cognizant of what's available right now, and use our networks and our friends' networks to get to the right opportunities.
Right. And in closing, to anybody out there, you've had a chance to now meet several people you may not have met. And I think one of the things we've heard loud and clear is expand your net, talk to people who have experience. You'll be surprised, I think, to find even professionals like Floyd and myself and other business executives are happy to share their experiences. We're all human. We'd like to connect. We'd like to help you. My greatest joy is not the paycheck. My greatest joy is seeing the success of my clients and my friends. And frankly, my clients are all my friends. So reach out. I'm happy to reach back to anybody who'd like to reach out to me. I'm sure Floyd and Jim and Bill and Gary feel the same. I hope this has been helpful. And if you're thinking about doing a deal, start now. Don't wait. Thank you very much, everybody. Well, we've had some great questions come in, and clearly we're not going to have enough time to answer them. So I want to remind everybody that we'll be available in the breakout panel afterwards. But the first couple of questions really have to do with deals in this age of COVID, and what kind of deal flow and how are deals changing. I'm going to take a quick stab at that, then ask Floyd to hop in, as he's been looking at some current deals as well. Deal flow really slowed down, as everybody knows. I think that's pretty anecdotal. It has started to pick up, but what we're seeing different in the deal flow, at least what I'm seeing that's different, is folks are taking a different approach to due diligence, actually trying to push some due diligence ahead of a letter of intent. They want to see things like who are your suppliers, who are your top customers, things that generally I'm not usually comfortable advising a seller to be putting out there, or on the buy side that I'm not asking until a letter of intent's in place. So we're seeing indication of interest with a broad valuation, and then wanting some more information. And one of the things that I think people need to think about in that process is, are your NDAs really in place? Are they strong enough that you're not going to get solicitation? You're not going to have any issues in doing that. And Floyd, I'd pitch it over to you. What are you seeing as far as the quality and tempo of deals here in the age of COVID?
I've actually seen some deals go pencils down where they just stop the deal in the process till they get more time. I've seen some very large PE firms walk away from deals because of the concern with their other portfolio companies trying to get through them. I do think due diligence is taking substantially longer to get done right now. I think the level of due diligence has been expanded to bake in any impact that we can of the COVID impact to these businesses. And I think lastly, what buyers are willing to pay as a multiple has been impacted right now because of the uncertainty with this COVID, the uncertainty with the supply chain and other circumstances that's occurring right now. So thought is go forward, but be cautious because it's very difficult to get transactions done.
Another question had to do with how you package the valuation and the consideration paid, and dealing with are we getting back to the world of earnouts? Are we getting back to seller participation, things like that? Yes, that's what I've been seeing is the thought that, okay, the value a year ago was X. We now have this wiggle room that we don't have good information, so we're willing to pay you some percentage of X. And if you really believe it's going to get back to X, you can ride along with us and participate if we get back to whatever the metrics were that got us to X. Floyd, you seeing anything different there?
Absolutely. I think the impact of using the earnout, having a second bite at the apple is getting stronger and stronger right now. Buyers are just afraid to put all the money on the table right now. They're willing to do it downstream where the current seller would share with the pain of not hitting the bogeys as far as valuation goes. So absolutely, I'm seeing that. I'm seeing much tighter covenants, if you will, and reps and warranties as well coming into what's going on as far as the seller's requirements for the buyer today.
Okay. I had an interesting question come in about cybersecurity audits and how they come into play. Bill, I understand you had some exposure, and Jim as well. So Bill, I'll start with your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, the due diligence process can be a surprise in a lot of ways. You get to see all the things you didn't know about your company, whether it's legal documents, leases that you thought you had in the file and they're not there. So you got a lot of things to clear up. One surprise was cybersecurity and really checking into that area. Fortunately, our company had done a good job with that, but not that I knew about as a CEO. But fortunately, our head of IT was on that and had done very good work with it. And it's about making sure you're protected, and also making sure you have really good logs in place for any problems that did pop up, and that you've recorded all of those instances and had a good remedy around it. I think it'd be a good thing as you're getting ready to do a transaction to have that checked out by an outside consultant. I wish we had done that prior, because I would have been assured we were clear with it. Great.
Jim, what's your experience there?
Yeah, it's been a massively important aspect. It has everything to do with the data that you possess and the harm that could occur if that data is breached. So in our case, we're dealing with information that is covered by HIPAA, SOC 2 audits, things like that are critical. And my encouragement is really just to say, don't think about what's the minimum I can spend and what's the minimum I can do to check a box on an RFP. If you're planning to talk to a strategic buyer, in the near future, because that old adage that you're only as strong as your weakest link is very true. In my case, Medical Mutual, looking at Bravo, could say, if Bravo has a breach, that's now a stain on Medical Mutual's reputation and a breach for Medical Mutual. They would not be interested in us saying, well, it was plenty for the size that we were. We fortunately had invested into IT and security, and when they came along, parties doing penetration tests, trying to hack into us on every front, we scored extremely well. And I really think it would have been a deal killer if we didn't. If you've got credit card information, things like that, you have to look at it through the lens of what's the damage to the buyer if that information's compromised.
I think that drives back to I'm sorry. I think it drives back to the concept of looking at your business through the eyes of the buyer. It's something that most of the folks out there that haven't done a transaction haven't seen, and hopefully what this panel is conveying as buyers, this is what either our buyer looked at or what we look at as buyers, goes back to the due diligence checklist, which goes through all those issues and raises cybersecurity. A new question we just received had to do with multiples. The audience member indicated that they're seeing higher multiples because of cheap money and wanted to know if that's the experience of those on the panel. I will quickly answer it from my experience. Most of the PE firms that I'm looking at, they have their money, they have easy access to money, and that's really not what's driving. They're looking at what is the actual value, what's the return. So I haven't seen that drive up multiples. I'm seeing people looking, saying, is this a value proposition? And there's the concern as is future with supply line or customer access, is the value proposition sound in the future, and this is why they're discounting. But Floyd, have you seen something different? Anybody else on the panel that wants to comment?
No, I've actually seen multiples get flattened some, and that's hence the reason for more of the earn-out type approach, if you will. Though outstanding companies through this cycle will be paid well that are performing through this difficult time, so that's true. But I think money was pretty cheap to begin with. Having it drop down and value some more is not going to make another turn for the multiple.
Anybody else on the panel? So let me throw this out. We're now well into COVID. We've seen the effects. So Bill, as you're looking at acquiring a business, what gives you pause now, and what can the business owner do to convince you that COVID has not interrupted their value proposition and they still have a good value proposition going forward? What kind of questions might you ask or be looking for?
Well, it has created an opportunity for us. Our revenue in general dropped about 50% with COVID. It's now come back to not 100%, but 90, 80, 90%. But key was the ability to do online selling and remote selling. And many of the acquisitions we look at were not that well set up for it. So it showed a vulnerability, and it's actually given us opportunity for more favorable pricing, in that targets we're looking at don't have a capability we do. And this uncovered that for them, and they see the benefits of joining a group like ours. So we can either get a lower price or go with more of an earn-out, as you were talking about. Look, we'll join our capabilities with yours. If we get the result, you'll get your dollars. If not, we get it at more of a discount.
That's interesting you say that, because it really validates what you said earlier about looking to create a proposition to, as a seller, to be able to, a story to tell the buyer, this is the value proposition. If I have more capital, I can grow this and it'll be more valuable. You're the more capital. This is why this is better. And had these targets you're looking at had a good outside advisor to say, hey, you should be looking at getting online right now, they would have that story instead of you having to feed it to them. So that's interesting. Jim, any thoughts there?
Well, I mean, nobody's got a crystal ball on COVID, right? But I think that it's a good opportunity, for one thing, for any organization or leadership team to demonstrate their innovation, to see what happens when they shift from peacetime into wartime, from the capabilities of their team and their tech, and how they can pivot to realize new opportunities. I also think, like in our case, we saw a number of formidable competitors go out of business because they just simply didn't have the cash to weather this storm. And so being somebody who, in our case, was fortunate to have the war chest of Medical Mutual behind us, that became an immediate selling advantage to our team, saying that, if you go with one of these other guys, unless they know something we don't, you can't predict how long COVID's going to last and what the impact's going to be, whereas we know we're prepared to weather the storm. So I think aligning yourself with the right partner that knows kind of your specific market and how the strengths and weaknesses, of how COVID is affecting you can actually turn into an opportunity.
Great. And Gary, quickly, I want to give you the last word on this topic. Any input for our audience?
Yeah, so if you're on the sell side, even if you're not looking at doing a transaction in the immediate future, and relative to EBITDA that we talked about and so forth, I think the word of the wise is to document while things are going on live, because a year from now, it's going to be more difficult to recreate all the adjustments that were associated with COVID. And like everybody said, due diligence is getting more intense because of that. So to have that supporting documentation to support that and be at the ready with it, I think is critical.
That's great. Well, everybody, thank you to the panel. Thank you to the co-sponsor, Barnes Wendling, Floyd Troughton. You've been great. I'm David Black with Ulmer & Byrne. I look forward to seeing you over in the breakout room. Answer any more questions. Thanks, everybody. I hope you've gotten something out of it. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.